Brothers and sisters, what a blessing to be with you again. What a blessing to be with the family that is the family of my family here. It's such a joy to be with you once or twice a year whenever we get to come back to sing with you, to eat and drink the body and blood of our Lord together. Thank you for being a blessing to my family. They bless me as you bless them. I look forward to living in the same city as you one day forever in the New Jerusalem. Turn your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. We proclaim that Jesus Christ is risen. And what good news that is. And yet if Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, if he really is the first fruits of the new creation that is coming, if he really is making all things new, then why do we suffer? Why is life so difficult? As I talk with you guys, and you talk with others, I imagine what we would all find as we got to know each other better and better and started revealing what was going on in our lives. Probably we would find that every single person here is going through something. Everyone has some thorn in their flesh, some problem in their life. And probably if the right person, if they were just talking to you and they just so happened to ask you about that particular thing, maybe it was something in the past, maybe it's something going on right now, and maybe it's some fear about the future. The right person saying the right thing could bring you to tears in a single instant. Because even though we proclaim that Jesus Christ is risen, for some reason, there is great and unceasing anguish still in our hearts and in our lives, and for each and every one of us, it's different. Why? Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. Isn't that kind of like Hakuna Matata? No worries? It's our problem-free philosophy. Just forget about your suffering. It's all good. Everything's being made new. Get over it. Put a smile on your face. I think we even have some songs in our songbook that for some crazy reason say something to the effect of, I don't know why I would ever have a problem with anything going on in my life. Maybe we should just sing those songs and blue skies and rainbows and just get on with it, right? Let's reign with Jesus and get the show on the road. Paul says something that I think reveals, can I tell you, I think it reveals everything about what Jesus came to do, what God is doing in all history with you and me. He says this in Romans 8:29, for those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Think about the grand picture of the story of the Bible. We were all made in the image of God to reign and rule with God, to fill the earth, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth with images of God, with God's glory and the knowledge of God and God's ways of love and kindness and joy and peace and righteousness and justice. And yet, what have we filled the earth with? With wickedness. But Jesus is the true image of God, who has come and always followed the ways of the Father, even to the point of death on a cross. And so now what God is doing in sending Jesus is he is all trying to conform us to the image of Jesus so that we can all bear God's image and so that we can all reign with him in the new creation and get back to doing what we were supposed to do from the very beginning and fill the new heavens and new earth as we reign with God with that goodness that God had always planned. But how is it? So our goal is to be conformed to the image of the Son, so that there's not just one image of God ruling over all creation, but maybe millions, reigning, millions of brothers and sisters in the family of the Messiah, reigning with the Messiah in that future age. how can we be conformed to the image of the Son? What do we need to do to be like Jesus? Let's go back in our minds and think through the Gospels for a moment. What kind of things did Jesus do? And now let's think about the apostles. Think about Paul and think about John and think about others. What did they tell us that we need to do in order to be like Jesus? You know, we wear those bracelets sometimes, WWJD. What would Jesus? So what do we need to do? What does Paul tell us we need to do in order to be conformed to the image of the Son? Well, that's right. There's 2 Corinthians chapter 14 where Paul says, I want you to walk on water as Jesus walked on water, right? No. Well, there's 1 Peter chapter 6, and Peter elaborates on how we need to always, every day, be casting out demons as Jesus cast out demons. Or maybe Romans 17, where Paul adds an addendum there and he says, I want you to heal every person with just a touch and a word. Is that what the scriptures say? No, if you're new to the scriptures, those are all make-believe scriptures that I just made up. So no, that's not what they say. What do the scriptures tell us? Repeatedly, they go back to the singular image, the unified image of the cross and the empty tomb. We are to die with Jesus that we might live with Jesus. Over and over, we suffer with him that we might live with him and reign with him. Romans 6:5, for if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. For he was crucified in weakness, but lives by the power of God. For we also are weak in him, but in dealing with you, we will live with him by the power of God. Are you with me in 2 Corinthians 4? And have you seen that theme as it was just read for us in 2 Corinthians 4? How Paul repeatedly said, in verses 10 through 12 especially, that we carry in our body the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus can be manifested in our body. We're always being given over to death for Jesus' sake so that the life of Jesus can be manifested in us. We're wasting away in our outer man, but in our inner man, we're being renewed day by day after the image of the Creator, after the image of the Son of God. Here in 2 Corinthians, really 1st and 2 Corinthians, it seems like Paul is having a problem with this church that he has fathered. And the problem is this: Paul is not like the teachers that they have now chosen for themselves. Paul suffers a lot, and he can't seem to leave that behind. It's important to him that he suffers. But the teachers that they've chosen for themselves, well, Paul calls them super. They were pretty super. They were living their best lives now. They were very image conscious, maybe. They seemed to just always be rejoicing, but never suffering in the midst of the rejoicing. Life is just, well, it's Hakuna Matata. Everything was good. They had great big smiles, but Paul, well, he said he bore the marks in his body of the crucified Lord. Can you imagine supplanting any preacher now or ever in the past that you've ever had with Paul? All right, so right now I've got a nice coat on, a nice shirt, and some nice pants and shoes. And Paul, I imagine, didn't have the sort of money that I have. And he didn't have the sort of life that many have, or at least that maybe we often portray. that we like to talk about very much. If you looked at his physical body, what would you have seen? But scars everywhere. He looked like a walking crucifixion victim. Would anybody like to choose this man who was not married, didn't have kids? I mean, this is not your ideal head pastor that you like to pick over your church, right? He doesn't have that shiny smile. He's always talking about suffering, right? It's always just so difficult with Paul. He can't get over Jesus on the cross and Jesus and the tomb. Plastic surgery, Paul? Come on, man. Can't we work on this a little bit? And what's worse is he just wouldn't let it go. His whole life, his whole demeanor, his teaching even, everything to him, it looked like a crucifixion. He said this to the Corinthians, "For I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling." Paul is not saying that he just couldn't stop talking about how Jesus died for our sins and how we're always forgiven by God. Such an important teaching of the scriptures. That's not the way he's thinking about the crucifixion in this passage, nor really throughout 1st and 2nd Corinthians. The way he sees the crucifixion is it's overlaid over his entire life. He says, "I was with you in weakness and fear and much trembling." What he means is he continued to live out the crucifixion in his life, in his very demeanor. He didn't move on from or minimize the pain or the suffering that he went through. In fact, he made it worse. He boasted of it. Now, to be clear, this is not Paul complaining about these things. When I say that he wouldn't move on from them, that doesn't mean he whined about them, but he boasted in them, and he talked about them as integral to the life of a Christian. And let's be honest, you and I, we like to kind of keep all that private, right? When we have some sort of thorn in our flesh, some sort of suffering in our life, we like to keep that private. We don't want other people to know about it so that they don't label us and then put us in that category and then maybe avoid us or treat us differently. And I'm with you in that. We like to keep those things private. And we kind of think as we look at Paul and his life, everybody's just thinking in the back of their mind. I remember thinking about it, like Paul's list of suffering, right, that he lists later in 2 Corinthians. I hope I don't end up like that. Or maybe we even see Jesus on the cross and we say, I hope I don't end up like that. Or maybe we say, Jesus died, so I don't have to. And yet what Paul is at pains to say throughout 1st and 2nd Corinthians, but especially, I believe, the heart of his message right here in verses 7 through 12, is no. He died that we would die with him. He was crucified that we would be crucified with him, so that then we would live with him. Our hope is that we will look like him then, now in this life, so that whatever he is now in his resurrection life, we will be like that now and in the future. And here in verses 7 through 12, what Paul is saying is that we have the knowledge of God through Jesus. That is a treasure, but we carry that about. We're not the treasure. We carry about the knowledge of God in Jesus. We carry about the gospel. And we are clay jars carrying that. Back in the ancient world, today clay jars are very sacred, right? We love them. We pay great deals of money for them. If they break, it's awful. We don't like that. Clay jars back then, that's not the way they viewed them. They were disposable, right? You don't try to break them, but they would break. That's what you expect. It's what you accept. If a clay jar falls on the ground, it will break. It's a done deal. it just turns to powder. And you throw it out. And Paul says here that we are the clay jars. We do not draw attention to ourselves. We draw attention to the treasure that we carry in us, namely the gospel, the knowledge of God in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. But what Paul says in this passage is that something has happened to us as these clay jars while we carry this treasure. Did you notice it? Go back to verse 8. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are persecuted, but not forsaken. We're struck down, but not destroyed. Can you imagine a clay jar that has now been afflicted, perplexed, persecuted, and struck down, and yet somehow not crushed, in despair, forsaken, or destroyed? That's impossible. There is no clay jar in the world that you could ever take and throw it on the ground and it not be crushed or destroyed. But Paul says we are these clay jars. You might afflict us. We might be perplexed and confused, persecuted, struck down, and yet somehow we are not crushed or in despair or completely forsaken or destroyed. Why? Why is that? If you took any other person and you put them through the sorts of things that Paul went through, shipwrecked, whipped, stoned, left for dead, in constant anxiety, at some point they would be in complete despair. At some point they would give up on their values. At some point they would give up on life maybe altogether and be constantly and only in despair. But what Paul says is that we're different because we have Jesus' resurrection power at work in us, in this suffering and in this crucifixion. All these afflictions, this being perplexed and persecuted, it represents us sharing in the death of Jesus, but us not being crushed, us somehow in the midst of our grief, being knocked down but not knocked out, as we might say, it represents the resurrection life of Jesus. We are these supernatural clay jars that are not destroyed. And it's because Jesus' resurrection power to transform your life is not just something that happens when your body rises from the dead in the final day, but it's something that is spiritually happening to you in your inner man right now. Somehow we are able to keep going. We who live are always carrying Jesus' death about in our bodies, his suffering, his grief, his being perplexed on the cross. But we're not driven to despair. We are not destroyed. The supernatural resurrection power of Jesus sustains us day by day. We are crucified, and yet we are full of life through the Holy Spirit, full of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and self-control. Really what we are is we are walking paradoxes. Just go to chapter 6 briefly and notice verses 8 through 10. In chapter 6, 8 through 10, Paul says that this is what their lives look like. This is how they commend themselves. This is the image that they put forward. This is the marketing of an apostle. They commend themselves, verse 6, verse 8, through honor and dishonor, through slander and praise. We're treated as impostors, yet are true, as unknown, yet well known, as dying, and behold we live, as punished, and yet not killed, as sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, as poor, yet making many rich, as having nothing, yet possessing everything. Do you see the paradox that is your life? And if you wonder this morning, why is everything so difficult? I wish it could just be like life is really hard or life is really great. Can we just be in hell or can we just be in heaven? I think I could accept it if it was just, it's going to be 80 years of hell or it's going to be 80 years of heaven. Just give me one or the other. And then I can accept it. But we don't get that. We get the cross and the empty tomb. We get you're poor, but you're going to make many rich. You're going to be slandered, and yet you're going to speak the truth. You're going to suffer, and yet you're going to smile. You're going to have so much sorrow in your heart, and yet so much joy at the same time. Power displayed in weakness. Why? Why is it like this? Why are we always carrying about his death so that we can display his resurrection life? Why always carry about Jesus' death in our bodies? When we are, I'm going to call this co-crucifixion with Jesus, being crucified with him. Not Jesus crucified so that we aren't crucified, but Jesus crucified so that we will be crucified with him. Co-crucifixion with Jesus is how we're molded into his image. Romans, Hebrews, other places, they speak of Jesus' suffering and Jesus' crucifixion as what ordained him for the priesthood, as what perfected him to be able to reign on high as our king and as our priest now. He could not be perfected without it. The Son could not. And in the same way, can we who are not the eternal Son of the Father become flesh, but who are simply dust made into flesh, can we be perfected? Can we be made ready to reign with Jesus? Can we become the image of God without suffering with Jesus? No, we cannot. Again, as Paul said, I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Why must we suffer? God is trying to make sure that we stay on the cross, that the old man actually dies and doesn't try to stumble out of the tomb prematurely. We need to die all the way so that Jesus Christ can live in us. But that's not just important for our own spirituality. Paul has another image in mind, if you will. See, you and I being the image of God means that there are no, idols that we would carve and display somewhere to show people what God is like. And I think this is very important. People cannot go back into the first century and they cannot see Jesus live. They cannot see Jesus die on the cross. They cannot see him resurrected. They cannot see the empty tomb. Well, maybe they can, if they have a lot of money, you can travel over to a place that maybe was the empty tomb, and maybe you could see that, right? But you can't experience all the power of that day by just going over there, and you can't carve an image or even paint a picture. Really, what we need is we need living examples of dead people who are resurrected. Does that make sense? We need examples, we need images of God, images of people who carry the cross on their back, and though they fall down, they keep getting back up. And might I say that this is becoming tremendously important as our world becomes more and more like the first century, the first centuries, I could say, where people were illiterate. Now, today people aren't illiterate, but we're what Neil Postman said, post-literate. We can read, but we don't want to unless it's bite-sized and funny. That's just the world that we live in. And so there's access to the Scriptures, and yet people do not read the Scriptures, even within churches of Christ. If you poll people in churches of Christ, oftentimes what you will find still is that the people who are participating in daily Bible reading is somewhere around 30%. We need walking images of the truth to draw people to the Scriptures, certainly. And especially here, just to display the power and the truth of Jesus. People are tired of words. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of promises and a lot of beautiful things to say. And we keep finding that they're not living the truth behind closed doors. We keep seeing that time and again in people's lives, in religious leaders in the world, political leaders, what have you. People get tired of hearing hot air coming out of people's mouths. Even all these, maybe, if you judge them to be eloquent words that I'm saying or from 2 Corinthians, so what if it's not true behind closed doors? Why must we always carry about Jesus' death in our bodies? Because we're saying Jesus is risen, but people struggle to believe it because they don't see it. They can't go back to the first century and see it, but they can believe it when they see it, or could I say, when they read it, both in the Scriptures and in your life and in my life. And they say, hey, I want to buy that jar. How in the world did you just throw that thing down on the ground, kick it around, spit at it, and it's still there, scarred, but there, carrying a treasure. I want what you have. Actually, we just had a woman like this showed up a Wednesday night 2.5 weeks ago, I believe. She has a Christian friend who used to live in Phoenix, but who now lives, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes south of here or something like that. They've been friends from the womb. And she came in saying, I don't know, my friend has always been saying these things my whole life. She's been saying these things, and it's never gotten through to me. But I'm going through difficult things now. I'm going through a lot of suffering. My son's been really sick. And suddenly I've been driven to turn to the Lord because those words are suddenly ringing true. And as I look at my friend's life, I see there is a lot that's changed in the last 50 or so years. So much has changed in the last 50 years, but my friend hasn't changed. She's the same. She just keeps clinging to the Lord and saying the same thing. And I realize I want what she has. Don't give up, brothers or sisters, on living out the spirituality of the cross, because not only will it change your life for the better, not only will you have the resurrection life of Jesus, but people will see that resurrection life. You will carry his death, and ultimately what will be manifested is the life of Jesus in the end. Now, you might be thinking, as I kind of thought when I was first reading some of these things, you know, maybe this is like a small theme in the Scriptures, right? This is like what we've done is we've just kind of conjured up a little theme that maybe we never thought about before, and this is like a minor thing. Can I tell you that this is everything? This is everything about what the Christian life is supposed to be about. Was talking this morning with Ashley about sometimes, well, let me just put it like this. There's a lot of cute things that people say on social media that are true, but maybe not always true. They don't encapsulate the entirety of the Christian life, and they look like really nice bumper stickers. You know, you put them on your computer or your notebook or on the back of your car, and you're like, all right, like one bumper sticker, like these are the good old days, right? All right, so like that's going to be my life. And I'm always going to think that these are the good old days. And that's great. Like sometimes those are true. But as we were talking this morning, I said, people were pretty content for about 2,000 years with one singular image of what life is like right now. And you know what it is? It's the cross. It's ubiquitous. It's the cross. And that is what our lives are now. If we ever want to make sense of our lives, what is it? It's the cross. And you might think, as I think frequently, well, I didn't sign up for this. We didn't sign up for this life of suffering. This is not what it's about. I think you're exaggerating. Yeah. Look, in our baptisms, what did we say? We said, I am so hopelessly corrupt, crucify me with him so that I can share in his life. Every Sunday, we eat the body and drink the blood of the man that was dead and yet now lives. And what do we say? What do you say in the medical world and the nutritional world? You are what you eat. That's one of the things that's happening in the Lord's Supper, is we're saying, I want to be what I'm eating. I want to become like him. I honor him so much that I will eat him so that I can become like him. And especially, as I said, in our baptisms, what we are saying is crucify me with Jesus. So often, baptism has been turned into a golden ticket into salvation. And that's just such a simplified image. It is us committing to a life of death, burial, and resurrection. Another question that we might have, or response that we might have, is, okay, maybe I did sign up for this. I didn't really realize that when I got in the water, but okay, how can I go on? How can I endure? Notice the end of chapter 4 in 2 Corinthians, verse 16. Paul says, so we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. All right, we've already spent time saying we've got to walk through this because the outer affliction is working inner renewal. But how can we endure? Paul says this is a light momentary affliction in comparison to the eternal weight of glory that is coming. What we're seeing now is transient. What we don't see yet is what is eternal. And we have to look to the things that we don't see, not to the things that we see. The scars are integral. The suffering is crucial, but it is not all that there is, and we can't focus only on that. We have to look to the resurrection life of Jesus. I mean, think about it. As a comparison, eternal weight, light and momentary. How long was Jesus' body in the grave? 3 days. And yet, how long is his resurrection body still living? We're going on over 2,000 years. He's beat out Methuselah at this point. An eternal weight of glory. How can we go on? Brothers and sisters, what I need to remember is this is transient. It's temporary. It is going to be done one day. I was just thinking about this the other day. By the way, I'm preaching about this not because I know these things through and through, but because I'm preaching at myself. I'm trying to live these things. Literally, every day I have to remind myself of these things. And what I was reminding myself of the other day, it just hit me all of a sudden. Holy cow, this isn't going to be forever. I mean, we're going to be done. It's not that much longer, and we're going to be done. Just hold on a little bit longer. It's transient. How can we endure? Turn to chapter 12. One more thing. We endure by remembering that this is transient, but we also endure by remembering that this is how we actually become powerful. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, here in chapter 12, Paul is saying that God has allowed a messenger from Satan to come into his life to torment him and afflict him. And he has prayed 3 times. I'm like, I've prayed 100 times, but okay, maybe 1,000. He's prayed 3 times about this, and pretty quickly he got an answer back. He prayed 3 times, and 3 times Jesus said no. Verse 9, and this was Jesus' response. He said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Paul had a splinter, you could say, a thorn underneath his flesh. And you know those thorns, those splinters that you just work on and they just will not come out, right? He speaks about suffering in his life, this messenger of Satan that was harassing him as like that splinter. And he's, "Lord, can you please remove this? Lord, can you please remove this?" And the Lord said, "No. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in your weakness." And here's what that means. You know, before your suffering, when you were young and you felt super strong, you were a young man, a young woman, your whole life was before you, you knew everything, right? You remember those days? You felt so strong, and yet that strength, you know what it was, is it was weakness. If anything would have hit you, you would have wilted in a moment. Anything serious. But today, in your weakness, what God wants to say is, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is perfected." You are becoming strong in the midst of that weakness. God's power is strong in you through the midst of the suffering. And I mean, think about it. Not with everything, but with many things, many difficulties that we went through earlier in life. With many, not all, with many of those things, do we not look back at them now and say, "I wish I could have that trial and not this one that I have now. Oh, I'd take that 100 times over. What was I so worried about?" Why? You were strengthened. You were lifting 20 pounds then. Now you're lifting 100 pounds. And you're becoming stronger in the process. It's the resurrection power of Jesus. It's the power of the empty tomb. It's the power of the Holy Spirit at work in you, making you strong in the weakness. And we cannot become strong without it. And might I say this, we were talking this morning in the 1 John class. Briefly, we talked about prayer and about how God gives us everything that we ask. Can I just say this? I think one thing that I'm seeing in my life, I'm kind of blown away by prayer at this point in time, increasingly, especially over the last year. So often in my life, I've focused on the exceptions, the things that God says no with. At least for me, one of the things that I think I'm seeing right now is that God says yes to so many things, and then he says no to a few things. And then we focus, unfortunately, if you're me, we focus on those few things, those thorns in the flesh that he leaves in us to strengthen us and to make us more like Jesus, to crucify us. He leaves those thorns in the flesh, and then we obsess over him and say, "See, he never answers prayer." Don't become like that. Don't say that. Don't think in those ways. Remember, If he says no or not right now, it's grace. It's transforming power of the cross. Don't be discouraged. Keep praying and don't lose heart. We have all that we ask of the Father. That's what he said in 1 John. Do we believe it? The strength and the power that we have without any trials is a mirage. But the strength that is worked through the cross, that is real power. God is making you so incredibly strong. John says something that I want to leave you with in chapter 19. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb. I don't know about you, but I always, up until maybe about 10 years ago or so, whenever I imagine Jesus being crucified, I imagine Jesus being crucified in this dark, gnarly place with these scary rocks and stuff like that, and it was ugly, and maybe there was trash and refuse everywhere. And you know what John says? No. In the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. And in that garden, there was a new tomb. And I think this is an image of our lives. Our lives are a mixture of garden blessings and crucifixions and tombs that the stone is rolled away from. This is our life. We are walking paradoxes. If you have questions about what your life is, just keep going back to that image. In the place where he was crucified was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb. That's your life. That's my life. A mixture of garden blessings and crucifixions and tombs. The Lord is so good, and he is so kind, and yet we must suffer with him and endure with him if we want to reign with him in that future world that has been made like a garden. Hold fast, cling to the cross, cling to the empty tomb. He will be faithful in the final day. It's just a few more days. Maybe it'll be next year. I'll see you in the New Jerusalem. If you need any help in your walk with Jesus Christ, come forward to the front while we stand and sing.